Ready? Okay. Let's go ahead and call the Johnston City Council meeting number 24-10 to order. Cindy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cope,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Reddy, Burkhart.
Here.
I want to welcome everyone that is in the audience this evening. If you're here for an item that is not on the agenda, we would ask for you to wait for, if you're here for an item that is on the agenda, we would ask for you to wait for that item to come up and address the council at that time. If you're here for an item that is not on the agenda, there will be an opportunity under public communications to address the council. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And who haven't I picked on? I don't, Mike, have you ever led us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the agenda approval. Mike, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mayor and council, there are two amendments to the agenda. Both of these are under consent agenda. Item number W, the resolution number should be 24-146. It's listed as 24-246. So it's just a correction there. And item Y, also under consent agenda, is listed as 24-247. It should be 24-147.
Council, any other changes? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Reddy,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to public communications. We have one scheduled public communication this evening, and that is a report or an update from Greg Edwards on the Catch Des Moines annual update. Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, council. Good evening, staff. Welcome, guests. I'm sure you're here for this show. Really a great year. This is really our last fiscal year report, but we'll talk about what's going on this year and what have you as well. With me tonight are Brock Conrad, our Vice President of Marketing, and Trina Flack, our Vice President of Sales, that do so much of the great work that we do. Can I click this through, or do you need
cannot.
to?
I'm going to read your mind.
This is not our mission statement. Our mission statement is essentially to bring in more visitors to the metro area. We kind of simplified this because we still have so many people that either come into our office or talk to us on the street and say, what is a Catch Des Moines anyway? Well, we kind of tell them this way, that, we're the group that bring in fun things like Dew Tour and NCAA basketball, Savannah Bananas, all those kind of great things. But, our real focus is not only to bring in more visitors, but to create more economic vitality throughout the whole metro area. And I think that's what we primarily do. So go ahead. Our board of directors, Paula continues to serve on our board for, this is what, your 50th year or something like that. Appreciate that. And you can see our chair this year is Brian Mulcahy, who's the assistant director of the Des Moines International Airport. Vice chair is Greg Hudson from West Des Moines. Our treasurer is Chris Conley with the Iowa Event Center. And then at-large members are Steve Peters with Hotel Fort Des Moines and Mayor Connie Bozen. And of course, then all of the cities that participate in the 2080 agreement have a seat on the board. And then we have 7 hospitality and 6 general business board members as well. People travel here. Hopefully they spend money a lot of different places, hotels, restaurants, shopping, et cetera, entertainment. Hopefully they spend the night in a hotel. And of course, then the hotel collects a 7% hotel motel tax, which goes back to the city, goes back to the state goes back to the city, and then the cities put out 2/7 to our organization, 2/7 to Bravo, and then retain 3/7 of that hotel tax. Budget this year, our auditors at Denman go back and look at how we're spending our money, and it's spent appropriately. Only 15% of our budget is actually spent on admin stuff. The rest is spent on where it should be spent, on marketing, sales, our sports sales programs, et cetera. On that note, I'm turning it over to Trina to brag a little bit about our sales team.
Good evening. As Greg mentioned, we're really recapping the 22-23 fiscal year. So these numbers are related to that. We hosted 371 events. 250 of those were because of sales efforts. So we have definites and assists in our categories. Definites are things that we have a role in bringing here, keeping here. Assists are things that happen regardless of whether we're involved, but we provide services. So like the Iowa State Fair would be one of those. We don't take credit for bringing that to the Metro. And then we booked an additional 261 events for future years. So just a snapshot of what occurred in 22-23. NCAA men's basketball, which actually isn't even on, oh yeah, there it is. National Veterans Golden Age Games, Nursing Organization Alliance, Farm Progress Show was fall of 22. We'll host it again in 24. State Games of America, which was co-hosted with Ames and youth facilities all over the Metro. Kennedy Center, which brought in 1,000 theater students using theaters all across the Metro for a week in January too. For 2024, it's May, so it's been kind of a crazy year already. I'm excited to see the star report from last weekend with state track, all Iowa Tech basketball, the University of Iowa playing at Principal Park. It was really very scarce on rooms, especially doubles. But we obviously started off January with the Iowa Caucus, which provided a good boost to the entire Metro and really just, you know, a good forward face for Iowa too. But as we look at coming on to June, we've got World Pork Expo the first week of June, which takes place at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, but brings, you know, people to hotels across our region. We'll host Ironman 70.3 again. Our big one for the year is really National Speech and Debate, which has about 8,000 students plus extras. So really 11,000, upwards of 14,000 people coming in for an entire week. So they're using all of the Iowa Event Center, but they're also using Des Moines Public Schools, Waukee Public Schools. I don't remember if Johnston's part of that. There's 12 total different schools within that mix. Yeah, Waukee, West Des Moines, and a couple outliers like Southeast Polk is in that mix too. So they're here for a whole week. We'll also host them in 2025. And then National Junior High Rodeo Finals is another one that's right on top of that. So a really strong 24 for this first half, and it'll just continue all the way through the year.
So what is Savannah Bananas?
Savannah Bananas, you need to be on TikTok. And that is really
Well, any
how
real
they're
social
famed.
media. Just ask
Yeah,
Harper. Harper will
social
tell you all
media
about it.
has brought this. I mean, they're a mix of like a concert and a baseball game, and it's all timed, and they travel around the country, and it's entertainment more than it, but they're good baseball.
Oh, well, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, they'll be here for 3 days over Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
The biggest fail that we had in our household this year was my inability to secure the Savannah Banana tickets last year. No, I failed.
They are
It's
a
the
hot
biggest fail of the
ticket.
year, so.
Yeah, they were here last year. They'll be here again Labor Day weekend too at Principal Park. So just a little bit about how we actually bring new business to the community. We have 10 trade shows throughout the year, and that's across all markets. So we do professional associations, sports, religious, medical, and just, you know, as much as we can to touch people on a national level. We have a focus in the Washington, D.C. area, so that we also, we technically have an office, which is a PO box, which allows us to be part of a couple different events with all those professional organizations there. We have third-party relationships, so those would be planners that book on behalf of organizations. So Merritt's, Conference Direct, Helms Briscoe are some examples of that. We host co-op events with other CVBs. That's really how we, you know, draw planners that if you met in Madison or if you met in Providence or even Omaha and host an event there, we know that you can have an event in our community. And it allows us to stretch our dollars a little bit further while we get that bigger reach. And then we have memberships in all the regular professional organizations, and then do sales calls in some of those key markets throughout the year. Our team has a site visit goal. We know that once we get those planners in our community, they're likely going to book. So we try and host over 75 of those each year. We have a sports advisory committee, which is made up of all of our local sports leaders. So the GMs of the professional teams, our park and rec directors, facility owners, kind of anybody that's in a leadership role across the community. We bring that group together 4 times a year and really just lean into that expertise and what we can grow and do better here. We have a customer advisory board that's really focused on the convention side. That's about 15 meeting planners across markets, across the country that we host twice a year, and, you know, ask them all the questions of contract language, facility development, what are other cities doing that we should be doing better? And they really are our trusted group of advisors. Some are gonna book business here, some host business here, some are really never gonna book business here, but are good experts in the industry that we can lean on. And then our catch champions, which are our locals that raise their hand and say, I'm part of a national or regional organization that can host events here, because we know that if we have a local involved that raises their hand, our chances of getting them are very strong. So specific to Johnston, we sent 20 leads to Johnston Properties, hosted 22 events here and 22 future events. And what we see, you know, as I really looked at that list, you know, there's a little bit of Corteva in that mix. They are obviously just a really good supporter of this community and do a lot of business here. And really heavy sports. There's some association business that happens, but just really a good sports market in this community, both, you know, from a facility and proximity side, but just the hotel product that's here too. So we'll continue to see that grow. AAU Junior Olympics was one that happened in July, and you could see the occupancy here too for that. Any questions for me? Oh, Star. So this is just the Metro Star occupancy. You can see how it slightly growing year over year, and the ADR is really what's growing larger. Questions for me before I turn it over to Brock?
I guess one quick question, you know, metro occupancy, obviously we're still not back pre-COVID, but I guess one question I asked, do we know how many rooms we had in 2019 versus 2023 in the metro?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get you, we have that information.
Has it grown?
Yeah, we just looked at this. We were just shy of 13,000 rooms as a metro in 2019, and we are almost, like really by the end of 2024, we should be at 14,000 rooms.
Okay,
So some growth.
thank you.
I don't have a question, but I do want to give you all a shout out because as we get lots of emails on lots of different subjects, I loved the fact that you are working so closely with Polk County Emergency Management with regard to an event that I wouldn't have connected together. You had already mentioned the National Speech and Debate. While Johnston itself is not hosting that, the fact that somebody within your organization and theirs recognized that we're going to have teens and tweens or whoever coming here and to provide and plan ahead greatly for the reassurance of parents and other folks like that is outstanding. I know there's lots of other events going on that weekend as well, and I just, the proactivity in what I'm gonna call the complete package of thinking about hosting folks here is not lost on me and certainly not lost on you, and I'm so impressed by that. So thank you. Keep that up.
Thank you for that though too. Johnston's a huge part of that, and just how, I think it's just a testament to how our region works together. AJ and the team at Polk County Emergency Management are so good at facilitating just the whole metro, right? I mean, I think about Ragbri, I think about Ironman, and like Johnston Grimes providing assets to something that's happening in Des Moines because you guys have the water resources. And it just really goes to speak to how everybody in this community is willing to say like, oh, it's not directly in my backyard, but it is, because that's the only way we're gonna get things done. So I appreciate that.
Great job.
This first slide is just a quick snapshot of the 2022-23 year in review for us. Some of the marketing highlights that we like to touch on. The first one here is the media highlights, and that's earned media impressions that our team does, reaching out to riders throughout the country, regionally, throughout the state, to get them to talk about Greater Des Moines. And so through those efforts, we had over 510 million impressions, which equaled out to over $1 million worth of advertising value equivalency. So $1 million worth of people talking about us and shedding light on Greater Des Moines without us paying for that. So we were very thrilled with that. To the right there, you can see some of the major publications that we were featured in through those efforts. And then there at the bottom, one of the biggest ones that we had for the year, and I'll talk a little bit about this year too, but last fiscal year, we had over 1.6 million website visitors, and that was up about 28% higher than any year previous. So a lot of people are consuming our content. They're reading why Greater Des Moines is a great place to visit, and they're sharing that information with friends and family, and we're getting more and more people to visit our website. And so we're really thrilled with that. We're finishing up our fiscal year for this year. Obviously, at the end of June, we're on pace to hit over 2 million website visitors for this year. So, 6-7 years ago, if we hit 1 million, that's where we're kind of feeling good. And we're already getting close to 2 million already this year. So we're very excited about that. And we're going to continue to grow that. And then this is just a quick snapshot too of what we do leisure side of marketing. So obviously we support Trina and her team and what they do on the sales side. But there's also that leisure market that we're trying to get families and young couples and older couples to come visit Greater Des Moines and spend the weekend or the week here. And we do that through our main markets. Obviously, the state of Iowa is a big one to come visit the capital city area. But Omaha is our biggest out-of-state market. Kansas City, Minneapolis, and then this says other, but the last probably 3 years, we've started getting into the Milwaukee and Chicago market. And through our website analytics, actually Chicago has become our second biggest out-of-state market for people to come to our website and view our content. So we're excited where that's continuing to trend. That wasn't a market really that we considered it to be a very strong market for us when we started kind of dabbling in it, but it's really grown. So we're excited about that. And then leisure interest, that would be arts and cultures, breweries, events and festivals. That's big ones, people traveling here for a specific event or a festival and then building their itineraries around.
Like Kites on the Green.
Yes, yeah, that's the biggest one, for sure. Then family-friendly attractions, food lovers, shopping, sports, you name it. We create content and then we follow people kind of depending on what their interests are, and we feed them that content, whether that's video, blogs, advertisements, whatever that might be. And so you can see there on the right a pretty even pie graph of how we're marketing people. Social media is a big one that just continues to grow year after year. Streaming TV is another one that continues to grow year after year. Broadcast TV still has a great place there. Paid search is one that we've really ramped up this past year, and that's people that are searching for traveling in the Midwest, around the state, maybe Omaha or some of our competitive cities. We're getting in front of them to maybe get them to come travel here to Greater Des Moines. And so that's been one that's been working really well for us this past year. And then there's some other ones like pre-roll video and some other out-of-home options. But media continues to grow, people consuming content in different ways, and we're trying to stay ahead of that and keep in front of them as much ways as we can. And then this is Greg.
We'll wrap it up. One other point to Trina's talk about national speech and debate being here. So that's here, it starts on June 20th, 19th? 15th. And then all of a sudden, this little group called NASCAR decides to book a big race in Newton. So rooms are gone, especially double rooms with so many kids. So just fair warning, I'm giving you guys a little inside info. If you want to Airbnb your homes over those dates, you might consider it gets some big bucks. So, but that's just one of those occasions that it's just going to go crazy. So Farm Progress show late in August is similar to that, some of the other big stuff. So anyway, bottom line, for every dollar we take in for hotel tax, we return back over $26 into the local economy. On that, happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions for Greg or the rest of the team? I think you must have answered all of our questions.
What we like to hear.
Do want to thank you for being here this evening. This
Appreciate
is a
your
great
partnership
update.
and really still, I think I said this last year, look forward to all the great things you still have coming, especially the Ignite project and some of your hotel projects and things like that. So keep moving forward.
Best is yet to come.
You guys are doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. You bet. Thank you. Okay, we are still under public communications. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Come forward and give us your name and address.
Jennifer Chamberlain, 9516 Century Woods Circle, Johnston. I am a resident, parent, and the president of the Johnston Community School District Board of Education. I stepped away from our meeting tonight to come speak with you to advocate for our flashing red light stop signs at the Horizon Elementary crosswalk on Windsor Parkway. Our superintendent previously inquired about this issue with the council in December of 2023 and was told a study had been done and generated a results report and discussion would be forthcoming. Trying to be respectful of your process, albeit impatiently, I waited for progress while receiving repeated reports of safety concerns from staff, parents, and board members. Unfortunately, the delay in addressing the issue has cost the district and city a beloved veteran employee, as the Horizon Summit Crossing Guard shared that he submitted his resignation after yet another incident of a driver not observing the posted non-flashing stop signs. The town previously took action to resolve a similar issue at Timber Ridge Elementary, so I am asking that you take expedited action to do the same at Horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Matt, do you have some information on this?
Yes, the lights at Timber Ridge were placed there temporarily due to the 4 lanes of traffic. We did have folks running that stop sign at Timber Ridge because it is so far apart. Matter of fact, we had signs on both sides of the road. That wouldn't do it. So we ultimately ended up with the flashing lights that would be temporary until we do the road diet project that is to narrow up that area on 54th Avenue. And then those lights would come down at that time. The distance across 54th is 60 feet across. If the council remembers, there were a few years ago, we did narrow up and put in a trail crossing between Horizon and Summit at this location. We put the bump outs in that area to reduce the travel between the back of curbs for the crossing. It also has a double stop sign on both sides of the road, and that distance is 28 feet. So it's about half of the distance that Timber Ridge is as well. So we do also have we did the citywide traffic study, and if you remember what came out of the citywide traffic study was kind of we were going to do a separate addendum study for all of the schools, because that was one of the biggest complaints that we did have was drop-off pickup times and school traffic around the schools. I will be receiving that report or that draft report this Friday. So once I have that, we will bring that back to council to have that discussion, and then likely engage the school district as well with those results.
We did all receive an email from Jennifer earlier this afternoon, and Councilwoman Martin said that she would forward it to you. Okay, so you did receive that. I think what I would encourage you to do, Matt, is you made a report tonight. Why don't you respond to that email, provide that information to Jennifer? But there may be some more conversation around this because of the study that we've just completed, right?
Mayor, before Matt walks away, can I ask one more question? It's only somewhat related to this, but we had a kind of a side conversation with regard to the roundabouts and pedestrian crossings with regard to the roundabouts in front of the high school specifically. And if I remember correctly, I just need you to jog my memory. There was some state guidance we were waiting on with regard to roundabouts and pedestrians. Is that right? Or I mean,
There were some new guidelines coming out with flashing lights at roundabouts.
okay.
Correct.
But we haven't heard on what those guidelines are, or have those been
I
received?
haven't heard what that is just yet,
Okay,
but I will look into it.
all right. And I know you and I had a conversation with regard to the flashing lights. Do you mind just talking for about 20 seconds on the technical side and the cost side of what that flashing light at Timber Ridge was?
Yeah, so the cost for that light, the segment of light, it's solar powered, so you don't have to run power to that location. The cost is between $500 to $1,000 for a set of those lights. They do have a switch on the bottom of them that activates them, that at Timber Ridge, the school crossing guard was turning on and off. They have been left on before, so now you have a stop sign that's folded down, but you've got a flashing light, so that gives a little bit of driver confusion, which is why the light's supposed to be temporary until we can have a more permanent solution.
Thank you.
The bump out that was put in at Newport Vista, is that about the same dimension, the road there? When you come back, I'd be interested about the dimension of the width of the road at Newport Vista versus the dimension at Windsor Parkway.
Yeah, the one at Newport Vista, you're talking in front of the library? Or no? Newport.
Not the library, it's on the, it crosses over so you can get to the elementary school.
Oh, at Newgate?
Oh, is it Newgate? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
they're in Green Meadows North.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got those, some of those have a pedestrian island. The one at Horizon does not have a pedestrian island in the middle. But I can compare those designs.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through it many times and you really slow down because it's narrow. So you have to physically, you have to slow your car down. So it works really well, but.
Yeah, and if you've ever been between Summit and Horizon, you've got traffic in both directions. And then you've also got parents trying to make a left-hand turn into, or they start to stack up in queue as they try and turn into the schools too. So there's a lot of traffic out there, mainly for the pickup time that usually lasts for about 30 minutes to approximately.
But Matt, have we done an assessment at the Horizon location on impact that bump out has had to manage speed in that area? Because the sense is, and Jennifer is not the first member of the school board that I've heard this issue from, and I've heard it from the school's administration as well, having concern about the crossing at Horizon. And so, I think we really value having a good working relationship with the school district and want to take their concerns seriously and try to get them resolved. And my sense is, obviously Jennifer didn't come here tonight unless she felt that maybe that we're not getting the message, right? So I do think we have to take that seriously and take into account their concerns. And either come back and say, here's the data on it, or what kind of resolution. And obviously there's a ton of traffic. I mean, we're doing a major construction project on 100th right now in front of that. So maybe once we're done with that, that'll impact that. I don't know how all that process is going, but I do think it's important for us to continue to be in good communication with the school district on this and what we see as potential ways to help find a good resolution to it. So.
Yeah, I think once we get our study back, that focuses just mainly on the schools and that, I think we can have a broader discussion and maybe ways of improvements too.
Yeah, it just seems like we've been waiting for the study for a long time. I mean, that's been my answer to school board members and administrators for quite some time. And I think that's getting to be kind of a little too long. So I think we need to.
As Matt noted, we're supposed to receive the draft report on Friday, so.
I know, it just
we're
seems
there.
like it's been
Yep.
a long time. So,
Understand.
I agree with you, and I've expressed that to the engineers as well.
thank you.
Before you leave, Jennifer, I just want to thank you for coming here this evening. I know this is not your normal venue, but coming before the council tonight and bringing this issue to our attention. As you've heard, we do have some information out there. Hopefully it'll help us find a solution to the problem, but please don't walk out of here and believe that the conversation is over with, because the safety of our children walking to school is a priority for us as it is for you. So we want to make sure that if there's a problem there, that we work together to get it fixed. So thank you. We are still under public communications. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council?
Mayor, council members, I'm Ann Dew. I live at 6114 Terrace Drive, and I'm here in regard to the renovation of Crown Point. My neighbors and I use the Crown Point exercise area and cross over the grass now to take the dogs for their walks. I contacted Mr. Poggy Weaver, and he said there are neither ordinances nor restrictions on how far or how close fencing must be to buildings during the renovation. I'm asking that you discuss with the contractor whether or not they might open the exercise park and also make a way for the dog walkers to be able to get their dogs to cement. The ground is quite uneven, and if it's wet, it's difficult to get to the parking lot so they can walk around the lake. It's about 80 feet when you go from the sidewalk to the parking lot that's over the grass. So that is our request. The second request is, we're an older population. It's a 55-plus community down at
That's
the
not so
East
old.
End. We are hoping that you might put in at least some arbor vitae this year, and this is a good planting time, and to act as a sound baffle. And the noise really, when it was measured, it didn't count on the openness of all the land. I can't sit on my back deck and make a phone call without using speakerphone. And that's iffy at some times of day. Our president of my association, John Harvey, has said that he would be delighted to water and look after any trees or shrubs that you might put in prior to the 2025 or later planting plan. And just one more aside, the Anopheles mosquitoes are back. I think they probably have just ended their oversleeping, so you might want to think about spraying
What mosquitoes?
Anopheles.
Okay. And I'm sure you know what that is, Matt, right? Okay.
The Anopheles are nasty little guys.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Watch out for them. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Drew, for your comments. I appreciate coming in today because I misunderstood some of your comments in the email that you had sent, and understand now that it's Crown Point. I was thinking that you were talking about the Ignite site. We will talk with the contractor. I'm not sure with the way they have staging in the parking lot area, how we could exactly accommodate that, but we'll review it and get back to you via email if there's any accommodation we do. But I'm looking at an aerial map. That's why I'm looking at my computer, and I can see the trail that you're talking about and how that there's a conflict for where we are storing materials, the contractor is, and then where Crown Point is. So we'll look at that. We do have extensive landscaping plans that the city has plans for. Part of the issue right now is there is some additional grading and construction that will go on some of that site. So once that's completed, and we're really holding for Ignite right now to do a little bit more work, and then we'll progress into our project, and then we'll have landscaping that will go in as part of that. So we do have a pretty extensive landscaping plan for that work. So that's something we are committed to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your interest.
So do you have Ann's phone number?
I have her email address.
Okay, email
so
address.
We'll
Okay,
follow up.
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. We are still under public communications. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearings. We have one public hearing this evening, and that is to conduct a public hearing to amend the budget for year ending June 30, 2024, and consider approval of resolution number 24-133. We'll open this public hearing at 7:37.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have the second budget amendment, public hearing for the fiscal '24 budget. This will be the final budget amendment for this budget. Specifically, this amendment will increase our overall revenues by 3.9 million and expenses by 1.7 million. That includes additional intergovernmental revenues related to the open access and Enrich Iowa library revenues, as well as a DOT grant, the RISE grant that was received this year. That was approximately $900,000. I believe that was originally not budgeted in this fiscal year. We also had revenues of approximately 2.1 million in interest that we've received to date. However, the majority of that interest is restricted between debt service, capital projects, TIF, the enterprise fund, so it can only be used for those specific purposes.
But it's good that we got it so that we can apply it for those purposes.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And we're currently earning like 5% interest
Yeah,
on
that's
our
wonderful.
investments, so. Then in expenses, some changes in the majority of our functions. However, the majority of changes related to the insurance premium increase from what was originally budgeted during budget season last year. That
Can I
was,
just ask about that real quick?
yeah, you could.
I thought the increase affected the year that we just passed the budget for, but.
Yes, and
Okay.
yes.
Yes.
So we had an increase when we received our premium increases a year ago. The budget was already set, and so that increase was above what we had originally budgeted for.
Guess I missed that somewhere.
So is the insurance sort of premium calendar or different than the fiscal calendar?
Yes.
It is like March.
It
April.
runs April to March, and then,
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's part of that challenge.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. So what we included in the budget session this year for the fiscal '25 budget was based on the renewal we got for this April that went into effect, so last year during that time. Then there was also increases in engineering and project costs on various projects that may have been budgeted in previous years, or just timing of projects and timing of equipment purchases from originally ordered versus arrival. One other large change included moving the building department from the community development into the public safety function. So you see a decrease in one function and an increase in the other, but essentially would net to zero, that change. Other than that, there were no other significant changes on expenses.
Council, have any questions for Sarah? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on this item? This is a public hearing.
Mayor, I actually do have one question there. Sarah, can you, I'm looking at page 4 of the exhibit entitled FY24 Amendment 2.pdf. Can you just walk me through it at the very bottom lower right-hand corner, ending fund balances, June 30th, just so we can get a sense as to what we're predicting and how that compares to what we start next year's fiscal budget predicting. Does that make sense? In other words, when we set our budget for next year, we had estimated that we would have a certain amount of ending fund balance. Where does this put us?
This would put us essentially looking a little better because we've now added 3 million of additional revenues and only 1.7 million of additional expenses. So that would slightly increase our fund balance overall. That exact amount I don't have readily available based on what we originally had planned going into for, that reserve versus what we.
But I can extrapolate that approximately that 1.3 difference or so is what we should be seeing in that beginning fund balance.
Correct, and then once we know what those actual numbers are, that will, skew it as well, depending on what our final actual expenses are for the year.
Okay.
Any other questions for Sarah? If not, we'll close the public hearing at 7:43. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 24-133?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Ready,
Yeah.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to the non-consent agenda, 7A, consider approval of resolution number 24-134, approving the site plan for 10,000 Northwest 70th Avenue, PZ case 24-15. Clayton.
Good evening again. If you'll give me 1 second to open up this site plan so we can reference. All right. Mel Bauman has submitted a site plan for renovation of an existing barn that's located on his property at the southwest corner at Northwest 100th Street and Northwest 70th Avenue. This structure is presently a legal non-conforming structure for purposes of setback, particularly the side and rear setbacks. Use of the structure for an allowed use within the district, which this property is zone C2, is allowed, provided it doesn't increase the nonconformity. Simply renovating the interior of the barn is not increasing the nonconformity, which is the setback, so it can certainly be used in a manner as proposed. The intended usage is to establish a retail business within the barn. In particular, Mel Bauman has indicated, I believe it's his daughter and wife, I think it is, that are looking to run, it's like an antique shop. The comparison they gave was the Brass Armadillo. That's just off of 8035. A little history on this property. It was annexed into the city in 2006. And since that time, it has been zoned C2 community commercial. It is shown on the comprehensive plan as commercial, and so it would be compliant with all zoning requirements as such for use. For landscaping, there's presently 2 existing trees on the site. I have requested they update the plans to show proper protection for the apple tree in the center, since that's the only one that's near proposed improvements. And then they will be installing street trees, as well as I do have a condition to identify location for open space landscaping to satisfy that requirement as well. Regarding access to the site, there's presently a right-in, right-out access to Northwest 100th Street. That will remain, and they will install an ADA compliant pedestrian path from the trail along Northwest 100th Street to the front entrance of the barn facility. Parking for this site, they are meeting the number of spaces. They are requesting council acceptance of an alternative surfacing material, and that material consisting of crushed red brick in lieu of pavement or asphalt. There's presently crushed red brick in the parking lot for the salon, kind of in the northern portion of the site. The remainder is presently gravel. He would top dress that with the crushed red brick, use that gravel as a sub base. Really, the intent is to maintain that that aesthetic that accompanies the barn there. And crushed red brick typically doesn't produce a dust, so it still is generally a dustless material. They would still pave the required ADA parking and access aisles, so all ADA compliance would be remained. And for architecture, the last thing I want to touch on, the only changes to the barn that are being proposed is replacement of the existing barn doors on the east facade. And reviewing this, they would be in compliance with our architectural regulations for that infill by doing a complete glass infill. There would be non-operable barn doors on the side, again, maintaining that barn aesthetic. All other facades would remain as presently established. It is legal non-conforming for architecture, but since they are not making modifications, it's not required to be brought into compliance. This has been before the Planning and Zoning Commission. They have recommended approval, and we do have a representative of the applicant in the audience should there be any questions. With that, I will wrap up my comments.
Council, any questions for Clayton?
I do, Mayor. So there's going to be 2 retail businesses on this property, correct?
Yes.
And it has had the gravel, the brick, crushed gravel for a while. That's not a new surface for this property, correct? We're just expanding it.
Correct, and it's a very minimal actual expansion, just to get the spacing. Other than that, it's just top dressing the gravel with crushed red brick for an aesthetic purpose.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Clayton?
So they're adding some red brick or crushed red, is there crushed red brick currently there?
There's crushed red brick on the parking on the salon. I'm kind of going over it with the cursor on the screen here, kind of this square in the top northern. The remainder is presently gravel. The only actual, so yes, it would be an expansion of the crushed red brick over top the existing gravel. The only expansion of all of the above is there's a limited expansion here on the north edge of the proposed parking on the north side of the barn, just to make sure they got the proper depth for the vehicles.
And then the handicap spot will be paved
Correct.
as well as the path, connecting that parking spot to the building.
Correct.
And then it looks like just kind of looking at the building, so you see the handicap spot and then kind of the little bit darker shade that kind of is sort of like an L on the side like this. So is that concrete going all the way along this?
Yeah, all along the south property line is a concrete walkway to provide ADA compliant access back to the public right of way.
Okay. So will that then all be crushed red brick in that area? So you'll,
With the exception of the walkway, which will be concrete.
okay.
Clayton, is a 3-foot wide poured sidewalk actually ADA accessible?
Yes, it is. I reviewed that in the ADA guidelines.
Oh, that's
this
a
afternoon.
shock. I thought it had to be 4 myself.
If it's in the public right of way, it is 4 feet. If it's on private site, 36 inches is the minimum.
Okay.
Any other questions for Clayton? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve resolution number 24-134?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Burkhart,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7B, consider resolution number 24-115, approving a moratorium on enforcement of the amended fire sprinkler threshold requirements of section 159.107 and 155.04.2N of the City of Johnston Code of Ordinances. Chief.
Mayor and council, this is a item that was brought to you the last meeting during the workshop and also brought before the fire board. One of the requests was for some more data as far as what's going on in the metro, what other departments are doing as far as CICC, whether they're participating, whether they're going to follow all of the recommendations or not. And so I did provide that in the packet. And so Ankeny is not going to participate, nor is Altoona, and they didn't last time, and they provided their own local amendments to the fire code. Des Moines is planning on having, participating in the CICC, and they're also planning on following all the recommendations from the CICC. I did not get a reply back from Clive, but Clive was the other one besides Des Moines that followed the recommendations as pushed out by the CICC after all of their meetings the last time. One of the other questions that was asked of the other chiefs in the metro was, do you have any data to support these lower thresholds? Basically reducing most of the 12,000 that are in the base code down to 6,000 square feet. And no one had any hard data. They, the ones that did said, you know, it's really anecdotal. West Des Moines referenced the National Fire Protection Association. The sprinklers are, any time that they're present, there are 89% fewer fire deaths and 27% lower injury rates. But that is for all sprinkler buildings, not specific to any size or not. And so if we were to follow that and say that's the data we should use, then we would have a 0 threshold for sprinklers. Everything would be sprinklered if we were really looking at that data to say that's how we're going to base our decision. So nobody else was able to provide any data to say that there's more fires in a building between 6,000 and 12,000 square feet, which is what we're really looking at, is going away from those reduced thresholds, which were recommended years ago by West Des Moines, kind of followed with some of the other western suburbs, kind of followed that, and then that's what was pushed to the CICC. But again, all of those that even participated, other than Clive and the city of Des Moines, everybody else still kind of took their own local amendments and picked and chose what they had and what they put in their local ordinances. So be happy to answer any other questions.
Council have any questions for the chief?
I do, Mayor. And Chief, I apologize for not giving you a heads up on this one. I know at the fire board, we did have a very good discussion with regard to it. And part of that discussion, you did share kind of what neighboring communities were doing. And at one point in time, you even relayed that Des Moines adopted the CICC recommendations as written, and you attributed that to, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me, because they didn't think they could get fire response service times down to a point or small enough to a point that they wouldn't help them or couldn't potentially help them.
That is what Fire Marshal Lund portrayed to me, is that they did what's called a standard of cover. And so you look at all your data and say, how many people can we get to a certain location within a certain amount of time using national standards, and say, do we want to meet that goal? Do we exceed that goal? Or are we not meeting the goal? And so they use that to say, because they have so many calls for service and their ambulance crews make up part of that, what we call an effective response force. And so for a 2,000 square foot home, they say we should have about 17 people on scene within 8 minutes time. Well, as you look at a geographic area, if you start taking pieces out of that puzzle and saying, well, they're already out on a call, so we can't count them. As they analyzed all of their data, they said, we can't always count on them being there for a fire. So that was their justification to go from the base code to reduce their thresholds. But again, it's whatever you're, I guess, trying to push. And so when this was first brought to me a few years ago, I said, well, it makes sense to keep the lower thresholds because we're still struggling to get enough staffing and be able to get enough on scene. But as we've grown and as we hope to continue to grow, I think we're going to be able to get there, especially with mutual aid, the CAD to CAD project, where we'll be able to dispatch those units from Urbandale immediately instead of having that 3-minute delay like we've always had since I've been here. This is hopefully going to happen this summer, that Polk County, when it's a call in Johnston or in Grimes, is able to dispatch Urbandale immediately without having to dispatch us, pick up the phone, call Urbandale, have Urbandale type all the information, and then dispatch them. So that should reduce their response times into our district as well. So looking at all those and the fact that as we have legislative changes that affect ability to raise taxes, and if we look at larger buildings, generally bring more taxable value, which is what we rely on the general fund to be able to add the additional staff. I kind of looked at all those different pieces and then going back to the data saying, is there anything that says there's more fires or more injuries between 6 and 12,000, and there is no data that anybody can use to support that decision to say, yeah, we just want to keep them low because that's what we've always had.
Thank you.
But Chief, I'm just reading through the resolution.
Yes.
And so it says, now therefore be resolved. And the first point is, it says a moratorium on the enforcement of the local amendments to automatic fire sprinkler system requirements located in section 155.042N building code. So do those local amendments apply exclusively to commercial structures? I want to make sure we're not.
Yes.
This isn't, do we have because do we have local amendments as well that deal with multifamily for sprinkler?
Yes, into the residential code.
Okay, so I want to make sure that this
Yes.
is narrowly tailored.
Yes, this is for commercial, and the one exception that we are looking at retaining our local amendment, which is the same as West Des Moines and kind of the West Metro and Des Moines, would be on the educational occupancies, which would be the daycares. Because when we talk about life hazard, to me, that is where we have the largest life hazard. You have infants and you have toddlers that can't self-evacuate. And so rather than allowing for a 12,000 square foot daycare, we're still saying 1,500 square feet makes sense to us because of the life hazard in that.
Yeah, I just want to, so how do we, so as far as, I just want to make sure, so because it talks about local amendments to the fire sprinkler system.
Yes.
And that are located specifically in this section.
Yes.
But that section specifically refers to commercial structures, not residential
Right,
structures.
the commercial structures.
Okay.
And so the resolution for the moratorium is to give us time to go and redo the code and bring it forward and do the 3 readings. But the moratorium is that basically the building department is not going to, or the fire department, not going to enforce that lowered threshold between when the resolution is approved. And Christine has indicated that because we're really setting policy as if we were writing a new ordinance or amending a current ordinance, that really we should probably do this in 3 readings as well, but still give us time to go ahead, review the ordinance, make changes to it, and then bring that back at a later date. The moratorium on the resolution tonight is just to allow for non-enforcement of our current reduced thresholds until such a time we can get a full resolution or full ordinance in front of the full council and have those 3 readings.
Yeah, so I guess the one suggestion I would like to kind of consider for language is as I look at, I'm on, under, again, that be resolved section number 5,
Okay.
because this is kind of just sort of process-wise, it's kind of a unique animal in the sense that any resolutions historically are a 1 reading and done deal, as opposed to an ordinance. Ordinances are 3 readings. And so to me, I would like to see the language in paragraph 5 modified to read something along the lines that this moratorium shall be in place upon council approval of 3 readings of the resolution, and until the council addresses the changes in the automatic fire sprinkler system requirements. That way it's clear to anybody that it doesn't go into effect upon first reading. And so.
That language work, Christine?
I can make that change.
Any other?
Yes, I'm sorry. Chief, I have a question. Why are we doing a moratorium now instead of just waiting until we have the new ordinance written?
Because we have current applications for businesses that would be affected by this. And so they're expanding current structures, and if they were to add, like one's offices, one's some bathrooms, I mean, small, like 1,500 square foot additions, it's requiring them to sprinkler the entire building, which is very, very expensive, especially going back to retrofit. It's much cheaper when you're doing it new construction, but when you got to go into an old building and put all new sprinklers in, and sometimes that includes adding another fire hydrant, and then also the line that brings into the sprinkler system. And so it's more than just adding some piping and heads within the structure. It's also a lot of infrastructure to bring the water and possibly another hydrant that has to be within a certain distance from the fire department connection on a sprinkler building. So we're talking, it could be $100,000 to add on a small addition. And we talked about it, I think the last, during the workshop, there was a business that really had to try to configure their addition on to keep it right underneath that threshold, which again, had they been able to go to the 12,000, they wouldn't have had to done so much work to stay under that 6,000, and probably would have a little more efficient addition to their building. But that's what we're kind of looking at, is most of this isn't necessarily all new construction, but it's some current businesses that want to expand and add on some square footage for storage or offices or whatever it might be.
How long would it normally take? What do you think it's going to take to get the ordinance to where you want it for us to vote on it?
Probably another couple months or so. Probably another 2 months by the time we sit down, go through it all, have Christine review the ordinance, make sure that we're covering all of our bases.
Okay.
I just have one other question for the chief. So Chief, going back to your chart here, and maybe you mentioned it, but you mentioned Clive, but I don't see them on this.
Again, I sent an email out to the chiefs and not everybody replied, so.
I would be interested in seeing both Clive and Urbandale's feedback on what they're thinking about. As we talked about in the work session.
I can certainly reach out again.
Kind of getting a handle on where kind of the western suburban communities, that being Urbandale, Clive, West Des Moines, how they're looking at approaching this issue. And specifically, not just, are you looking at doing amendments, or are you looking at this, the CICC, but more specifically, hey, we think that this regulation on this type of building doesn't make sense. Do you agree?
Well, both those communities have new fire chiefs within the last few months, and so it might be that they're still talking through all that, trying to work it out, so.
So to me, whatever specific communication you can have with those West Des Moines, Urbandale, Clive, it helps kind of make this chart a little bit more robust from my perspective, so. And obviously, we'll, if it is approved tonight, then we'll have another opportunity to look at it in future meetings, so.
Thank you.
Chief, prior to the meeting tonight, I went back and listened to our discussion at the fire board meeting, because I thought it really was a very good discussion. I thought a lot of good points were raised there, and there was a lot of deliberation back and forth. Just so the council knows, the fire board did not make a recommendation to either city councils, and they did that because we're kind of midstream in Grimes adopting their changes, and we had just had it introduced to us. And while we had some conversation about in the future, it would be appropriate for the fire board to make recommendations on policy changes that are in the fire code, and that our fire district will have to enforce. We didn't think that because of the point we were at in the process of this particular issue, it would be appropriate for a recommendation. So, but we did have really good discussion, and I would encourage all of you, if you have half an hour of free time, to listen to that discussion, because it was very good. One of the things that I think I heard during that discussion, and I'm not sure that we have discussed, maybe you brought it up during our workshop, but what is the minimum requirement for a residential house?
So we have a requirement of 8,000 square feet, and that includes the garage.
Right. So
So
for a residential house where people live and sleep and, you know, do everything else, the minimum requirement is 8,000.
before it triggers that threshold where they
Right.
have to put
And
in
here
a
we're talking
residential.
about 6,000 for a commercial building that people might only be in for a few hours a day. So I hadn't thought about that until that point was made, or that information was made available at the fire board meeting, so.
And Adam can kind of reiterate, but when we look at commercial buildings, there are a lot of other life safety issues that are part of the construction and the plan review process. I mean,
Again, different than a house.
we have emergency lighting, we have lit exit signs, we have much wider hallways and doorways than you would in a typical residential structure. And so all of those are part of that life safety that goes into the building of a commercial structure. And generally people are awake and, you know, and they're working and the fire alarm goes off and they're able to exit right away versus being at home and asleep and having a fire happen while you're asleep, so.
And the other thing that you've pointed out, and kind of in the reverse, you've said that there are only 2 communities in the metro area that have adopted the CICC recommendations in total. Johnston was not one of them. And so we have adopted our own local amendments to, and I'm assuming that includes the fire code as well as many of the other codes. So this would not be something unusual for us to do.
Mayor, for those of us not on the fire board, we don't have access to that recording. So if it would be possible for that to be
Cindy will get it to
circulated,
you.
that would be
You
great.
bet.
So. Because I went to look to see if it
Yeah.
was, and it was not, and while there is a fire board
Right.
section of board docs, it doesn't have that, so it would be
It's
helpful.
typically not distributed.
It will. It
Yeah,
will.
Okay,
but-
perfect, thank you.
But
Yeah,
Cindy
right,
can
right,
get it to
right,
all
right.
of us, yeah. Yeah, it was great discussion.
The fact that our city clerk is still wearing multiple hats and we're still short on staff and trying to get the minutes done and all these other things is
Well,
why
it wouldn't
it's
be
not
typical
posted yet.
that she would necessarily distribute that, so this is,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
And, you know, I found, and I was almost glad that the minutes weren't done, because I found the video recording much more,
Comprehensive.
yeah, informative than the minutes would have been. So, any other questions for the chief? Comments?
Meryl, I can save my comments until after a motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 24-115?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second, discussion?
If you're willing. I have learned throughout this process a lot more about CICC than I had. I think I put a lot more faith, credence, and I almost erred on saying credibility. I certainly think all of the attendees are credible in that regard. But I looked at CICC as a means to try to even the playing field amongst our suburban neighbors as well as the metro communities as a whole. I look at this as an opportunity to make sure that we are keeping our residents safe, but also trying to look after anyone who shops, works, gets education, and certainly visits any establishment, commercial, or even visiting residential areas in our city. We have a process and a plan to evaluate and participate in CICC every couple of years. And I think that that is a suitable timeframe to be able to review ordinances and be able to make those changes. I hope we can get on a same timeframe as Grimes. They're well delayed from us, as they're just now considering, as the mayor referenced, the 2021, if I'm not mistaken, changes or at least updates as they consider those. I also heard the chief say tonight that there are hopes that we won't have to worry about some of our mutual aid delays when it comes to having more folks on scene if need be in these types of environments. And so when we get to that point where we actually can do that, that may be an appropriate time to consider some changes. But frankly, I'd like more than anything that when the CICC comes back with their changes, that we then bring it up then. One, as a matter of consistency for our city, but also from the standpoint of that we're not trying to do something to unfairly leverage ourselves to try to recruit business or do something that otherwise other developers wouldn't have experienced in their dealings with Johnston. I understand that we have some pressing projects right now, but we've had some pressing projects that did have to meet that because they didn't approach or we didn't waive or have a moratorium from that standpoint. So I'll be voting no on the moratorium. I certainly will welcome formal changes when they come forward so that we can think heartily about them. I definitely want to try to keep folks safe, as do everyone else. And that 89% of all buildings being sprinkled certainly weighs into maybe even how we approach some other buildings in the future too.
Other discussion? Well, I don't have a vote on this, but I will weigh in on just a couple of comments here. And I just want to say, Councilman Burkhart, I appreciate your view on this, and I respect it, and I'm glad you shared it. You know, what I'm hearing the chief say, based on his research, and he's been researching this for some time now, is that there's no data to support the lower threshold that we currently have in our fire code. You know, I appreciate the fact that the CCICC, you know, they have reviewed this and they have, you know, made a different recommendation. But the fact is, we have our experts right here. We have our fire chief and we have our building code inspector, whatever your title is. These are our experts, and they have researched this issue, and they've come forward to us with a recommendation. And I respect that, and I'm going to give that higher priority than I am the CICC. We are the policymaking body for our community. The CICC is not. And so, you know, it's incumbent on us to take into consideration the information that we are provided by our experts and make the best decisions that we can for our community. I am not hearing anything in what's being recommended to us that we are putting any of our residents at greater risk. There is no data to support that. Sure, we could sprinkle every building, every bathroom, every structure in this community, and would that make people safer? Well, arguably it does, but that doesn't make any sense. What I'm hearing is, the 12,000 square feet is, based on what our experts have researched, the 12,000 is appropriate and will keep people safe. So if I had a vote, I would vote for the resolution.
I would just like to make a quick comment too. I'm going to support the resolution too. I do think that it's important to note that the types of buildings that are commercial in nature that would not be sprinkled are those that are between 6,000 and 12,000 feet. So I think it's important for residents or anybody who's listening, if you're in a commercial building that's over 12,000 square feet in Johnston or anywhere in the metro, it will be sprinklered. So I think it's important, that's an important thing to note. I do think one thing I really want staff though to keep in mind is I get a little nervous when people sort of feel like, well, the legislature is making property taxes tougher, so then we need to reduce our standards to have more commercial buildings. So that makes, I don't want that to be a driver of decision making. The legislature is going to do what they're going to do, and we're going to do what we're going to do, right? And so I want to make it clear that that is something I don't want driving our decision-making. But I don't think it is driving the decision-making. I think what's really driving this decision-making is the fact that if you really believe in sprinklers, then you probably should bring an ordinance that requires all residential construction, which is really the type of buildings where sprinklers benefit, because those are where people are sleeping, right? And so, this moratorium or any ordinance is not going to change the types of buildings that currently exist in Johnston where sprinklers are required, that are residential in nature. They will all remain the same. So I will support it, but the fact that it's sort of, there's any suggestion that we're doing this because of somebody's bringing something forward, that's certainly not the reason why I think we should be doing that, so.
Any other comments? Not, Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
No.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart.
No.
Motion passed. Thank you, Chief. Moving on to item 7C. Third and final consideration of ordinance number 1116, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Johnston, Iowa, for the purpose of revising parking regulations and fine amounts, and to adopt and publish. Any changes? Any comments?
There's been no changes.
Anybody own this one?
All right, there's been no changes since the second reading and no public comment.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve third and final consideration of ordinance number 1116?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7D, consider approval of the first reading of ordinance number 1118, an ordinance amending the Johnston Code of Ordinances by amending section 69.09 to modify parking on 1900 Drive. Clayton.
The final plat for Carmel Hyperion was on your consent agenda tonight. That got approved, and kind of some cleanup items associated with that. The preliminary plat for Carmel Hyperion had a condition that 1900 Drive have no parking restricted, so no parking on both sides of the road between Northwest Beaver Drive and the first cul-de-sac, which is Sandy Court. And the intent and purpose of that is this is a single entrance cul-de-sac roadway serving 27 lots. And by having no parking on either side, it preserves a greater opportunity for emergency vehicle access back into the development. So that is what this ordinance establishes: no parking on both sides of 1900 Drive between Northwest Beaver Drive and Sandy Court. Staff does recommend approval.
Questions for Clayton?
Clayton, just looking at the plat, so it looks like then does that mean that lot 23, there would be no parking on both sides of 1900 in front of lot 23? That's a lot that there's a house that's intended to be built upon, is that right?
That is correct.
And then this lot 0, is that going to be a buildable lot or not?
Yes, it will be a buildable lot. The intent is that's a support structure for the driving range.
Okay, but so it's not a residential lot?
Not intended as a residential
Okay.
lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Clayton? If not, do we have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance number 1118?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7E, consider approval of first reading of ordinance number 1119, amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 65, to modify the locations of stop intersections. Clayton.
This item also relates to Carmel Hyperion. We would be establishing a stop intersection at Northwest Beaver Drive for westbound traveling traffic, and then a stop sign location at both Sandy Court and Bindalow Court for southbound traffic where it intersects with 1900 Drive. Staff does recommend approval.
Stop sign, those 2 and 1 on Beaver.
Correct.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance number 1119?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, further discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Ready, Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
yes,
Motion passed. Item 7F, consider approval of the third reading and to adopt and publish ordinance number 1117, an official zoning map amendment for 13.137 acres from R1 60 Small Lot Residential Zoning District to C1 Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District. The subject property is 9901 Northwest 62nd Avenue, PZ case 24-06. Clayton?
There have been no changes and no public comments received since second reading.
Any questions for Clayton? If not, do we have a motion to approve third reading and to adopt and publish number 1117?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
yes,
Ready,
Motion passed.
Can I just ask a real quick question before?
Sure.
So when we were on item 7B, the moratorium, when we were discussing it, we talked about amending it to add the language. But my motion did not make reference to an amended version. I just want to make sure kind of where we ended up with that.
I can make the change and for the second reading, it will have
Okay,
that
so the
revision
second,
in there.
it'll be
Yeah.
reflected. I just, okay, I want to make
It's
sure.
not a substantive change in my view, so yeah, that's fine.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Moving on to item 7G, consider approval of claims in the amount of $1,311,497.24.
Move approval.
second,
Have a motion and a second. Discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
yes,
Ready, Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. We have already gone through the city administrator and staff comments, the city council comments. Is there anything else to come before this august body? Chief, my poppies are just now blooming. I've taken pictures. Thank you. We are adjourned.
That was, that it's.